Welcome back to Life's Chillin'. My name is Avital, and this week's Parsha is Parshat Tazria. In Parshat Tazria, the main focus is really centered around saras. If you're not familiar with what sarat is basically white lesions that people would get on their body. And it's often mistranslated as leprosy. It's really not leprosy. It is just these white lesions that kind of looked like leprosy, and so that's why it often gets conflated with that. But saras was an interesting disease or ailment because it was a physical manifestation of a spiritual condition, basically. Because people would develop saras, one of the most common reasons they would get saras was for speaking lashon hara. Lashon hara is sort of gossip or slander, so for speaking about other people. And we know this because later in the Torah, in the book of Devarim, in Deuteronomy, we see that Miriam, the sister of Moses, develops saras because she spoke about Moses and his private life to her brother Aaron. And so because of that, she ended up with saras, and from there we know that one of the reasons that you get saras, the main reason, would be for speaking about someone else. And so saras is a really unique condition in that sense. And the way it would work is that somebody would see these white lesions on their body, and they would go to the temple or to the Mishkan, and they would talk to the Kohen. And the Kohen would look at it, and he would say, yes, this is saras. He would draw sort of a circle around the area so that they would know where the condition was isolated to. He would declare them as contaminated. And then the person would need to quarantine, they need to isolate themselves for a week. Commentators say that it was very fitting that the punishment for saras was this isolation, because when you were speaking poorly about somebody, if you were gossiping about them, you were isolating them as well. Because think about it, if you are speaking poorly about somebody to your friends, are they really going to want to connect with that person? You are isolating them, and therefore your sort of punishment, in return, you have to isolate yourself when you're in this condition so that you can sort of see what it feels like and hopefully mend your ways and not do it again. When I was thinking about saras, I was really reflecting on an idea that I began to develop in last week's Life's Chillin' video about Parshat Shmini, where Parshat Shmini, we learn the laws of kashrut. So kashrut is keeping kosher and all the foods that we can and cannot eat. And I was thinking about it that in the Torah, we've talked about this idea many times before, it is not a coincidence for two topics to be right next to each other. It's not a coincidence. Everything in the Torah is in the exact space it's supposed to be in for a reason. And so if we learn the laws of kashrut and then immediately after we're learning the laws of saras, which we got for gossiping about people, then those two things are probably connected. And so when I was thinking about that idea of how are these things connected, it all centers around the mouth. Because when you think about kashrut is about what we are putting into our mouths and into our bodies. And saras and lashon hara is something that comes from out of our mouth, if that makes sense. So it's about what we're putting in and what we're letting out. And I think that the broader idea here is about a consciousness of what we're consuming and letting out. When we eat food, right, it comes through our mouths and it gets digested in our body. As soon as we put food in our mouths, we begin to digest. Our bodies are processing what we've put in. And similarly, in a sense, if you think about it, as soon as we speak words, we have to digest the consequences of what we said. Can't take those words back. There's this story that I'm sure many of you have heard when they're teaching the idea of lashon hara about not gossiping to children. Often they use this idea of basically saying to a kid, like, okay, we're going to put sugar and salt in the same bowl. And now I really want you to mix it up. And now that you've mixed it up and the sugar and salt are all together, I want you to separate them. And the idea is that once you've mixed it up, once you've put words out, there's no taking them back. They're out there. You can't separate them. They've made their impact. So the idea, again, in general, of being conscious, being aware, being super intentional about what we allow into our bodies and out of our bodies is this idea that I really think bridges these two concepts together. And further, Again, as saras being this physical manifestation of a spiritual condition, our bodies, it's just a reminder of how much of a vessel our bodies are for spirituality and for our soul. With kashrut, the idea is that if you are putting good things into your body, that allows your soul to grow and to expand and to be nourished. The idea behind eating as people with a soul and a body is that we should be nourishing our bodies so that we can do the work of our soul. That we are fueling ourselves in order to continue in our mission. It's not as much for like that animalistic desire of eating as much as it is for giving us the energy and the endurance to continue in our mission and our purpose. And so when we think of our bodies as these vessels for spirituality, it makes sense that saras would be this physical manifestation of a spiritual condition, and kashrut would be the physical manifestation of a spiritual thing as well. In both ways, we need to be conscious of what comes in and out of our mouth, this gateway, this portal. We have to be so conscious and careful about what comes in and out, because it is what allows us to either grow in our spirituality or to fall in our spirituality and our connection to God, to other human beings. There's a ton of power in our mouth and in what we are taking in and letting out. And so I really think that by these two ideas being right next to each other, we can understand their connection of being very intentional and conscious of the way we use our mouths and our speech and what comes into our body as well. So I hope you all have a wonderful week and a Shabbat Shalom, and I look forward to speaking with you next time.